It's the Hockey Hub. So glad you could join us once again. I'm Adam Pellerin. So we've talked a lot of Bruins hockey on this podcast. We talk all things New England hockey, but there is a heavy concentration on the Bruins. And we've been fortunate enough to be joined by a number of special guests on the Hockey Hub. A lot of former players have come on, and they've been some pretty big names. And this year we had Rick Middleton, who was recently inducted into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame, the head coach of the Paralympic sled team back in 2002 in Salt Lake City. We had Shawn Thornton, who, of course, won a Stanley Cup with the Bruins and now works in the front office of the Florida Panthers. Brad Park, who was honored at the Tradition. He was on the Hockey Hub. And of course, the captain of the Boston Bruins prior to Brad Marchand, Patrice Bergeron, who was honored at the Centennial Game as the Bruins celebrated their 100-year anniversary. Enjoy as we bring you those special guests now. Obviously, your history in the game of hockey is vast. I'm wearing an Original Six T-shirt. You played for half of the teams on this list, the Bruins, Rangers, and closing out your career with the Red Wings. Let's just take it back to your battles against the Bruins when you were a member of the New York Rangers in the postseason in the Stanley Cup final. What was it like going up against the big bad Bruins?
Well, the Bruins and the Rangers in the 60s went from the two worst teams in the league to the two best teams in the league. And, with the rivalry between New York and Boston, the Knicks and the Celtics, the Red Sox and the Yankees, and the Bruins and the Rangers, it was just a natural rivalry. And as the two teams got to be the top ones in the league, they really didn't like each other. If you walked into a restaurant or a bar and you saw, a Boston Bruins sitting in there, you turned around and walked out. It was just that mentality that you had to have.
So I guess with that in mind, Brad, so when the trade happens in November of 1975, and for a lot of people, they may not have remembered that blockbuster, you come from the Rangers to the Bruins along with Jean Rattel and Joe Zanussi, Phil Esposito, Carol Vadnais head the other way and play for the Blue Shirts. How long did it take you before you were able to settle in with the Bruins?
Well, I think it wasn't the first night. I'll tell you that. The last place that I really wanted to go was Boston because when I was with the Rangers, I was got such animosity in my fan mail that the FBI used to walk me on the ice and off the ice in the Boston Garden because of the threats I would get. So I wasn't too happy when I first heard about it. And then, you kind of get a reality check because you start to get mad that the team that, you belong to didn't want you anymore. And that was the attitude I took. I got a little mad and went to the Bruins and realized it was going to be a shock for them when I walk in the dressing room as well as Jean Rattel. So, but when we got to the rink, the first guy that came out of the dressing room to meet me out, under the stands was Bobby Orr, and that kind of softened the entrance.
Yeah, I want to get to playing with Bobby Orr in a second, but just in terms of when the trade happened, doing my research, I mean, you were in Vancouver with the Rangers, and then the next game you played was in Vancouver with the Bruins, which is kind of crazy. That must have been an absolute whirlwind, just an unusual situation to say the least.
It was. I mean, we played in Vancouver and we beat them like 4-1. I think Jean Rattel was first star and I was second star. And then we go to Oakland and 7:30 in the morning, I get a phone call to come to the coach's room. And right then I knew I'd been traded. So because they don't call you at 7:30 in the morning to talk strategy. And when I walked up there, I said to Ron Stewart, I said, he opened the door. I said, "Where am I going?" He says, "You're going to Boston." I said, "Boston? I'm going to Boston?" I said, "Who am I going for?" He says, "Esposito." I'm going for Phil Esposito. He says, no, you and John Rattel. I said, John Rattel and I for Esposito? No, we got Vadnais. 2 for 2? No, we're throwing in Joe Zanuzzi. And it was like, oh, really? And when we get to Boston or to Vancouver, we go back there to play. And, we hear the rumors in the morning. Wayne Cashman was so upset. All the stuff, the beds and the couches and everything in his hotel room ended up in the parking lot. So that was like, well, this is going to be interesting. And, but by the time we got there and we lost in Vancouver, we went to Oakland, played there next, beat them, and then went back to Boston, and, we kind of got on a tear.
Brad, when you went from one team to the next, and you mentioned, for a while the Bruins and the Rangers were at the bottom, and then they started to move to the top, and obviously you guys had a chance to meet in the Stanley Cup final. But was there anything that struck you that was different coming to the Bruins culture from the culture you had left with the Rangers?
Yeah, one of the things that was different is with the Rangers, the day of the game, we always had a team meal, and we all ate together. And with the Bruins, they didn't have a team meal. You kind of eat on your own. That was a little bit of difference. I think the other difference was the time it took to get to the rink. In New York, we lived out in Long Beach, about an hour and 15 minutes out of New York. We only went in for the games. In Boston, I ended up living in Linfield, and it was a 15-minute ride. So that was a huge difference, just the size of the city.
I do want to just get back to something that I read, which I thought was just a great story from right after you were traded to Boston. You talk about Bobby Orr being very gracious in your first meeting with him, but what was your first meeting like with Terry O'Reilly?
That's a very interesting thing. Prior to coming to Boston, I think it was a year before, Terry and I got into it. I was coming out of my zone with the puck. It was in New York, and I was making a pass, and he come from my left side, and as he came over, down he goes. And he's on the ice on his knees, and I take his head and I jam it into the ice, and I split him up the middle. And he comes after me, and we end up, in a wrestling match, we end up on the ice, and he's on top of me, and we're like nose to nose, and he's bleeding on me. And he said, you jammed my head in the ice. I said, you're goddamn right. I said, you tried to break my ankle and fall on it. He said, I did not. I'm just clumsy. So now for the next 2 games we played against them, right, is every time I played, it was on the ice with Terry, I was dancing like Baryshnikov in the ballerina. He was taking runs at me, and I'm doing pirouettes and everything to get out of his way. So now we haven't played each other in the year I got traded. And I walk into the dressing room, and there I go walk around, I put my hand out to say hello to Terry, and he puts his hand out and he pulls it back, and he says, I owe you. And I said, yeah, you probably do. So once a month for a number of years when I was there in practice, every once in a while he would cold cock me and knock me on my ass. And I'd look up to him and say, we done yet? He said, not yet. That was Taz.
What did Cherry have to say?
Cherry didn't know anything. It wasn't like he took a real cheap shot at me, but he just knocked me on my ass, right? And Cherry was all for that, right?
That's fantastic that he was able to stick up with you. Brad, I know it was just such a limited amount of time that you and Bobby Orr were together, but when you finally had a chance to play with him as a teammate, was there something in particular that really stuck out?
The idea was, as Don Cherry said, one of you is going to be on the ice all the time. That's what we want to do. You will be together on the power play. So we were on the power play, and Bobby always played the right sides, and I did too in New York. But but with Bobby, I moved to the left side, and up front we had Wayne Cashman, John Rattel, and John Busick. You had 5 guys that were very good with the puck, never panicked, could thread the puck through skates, over sticks, between legs. And the power play was just, Bobby, neither one of us would have a problem gaining the zone. So we always got in the zone under control, and then we just move it around. And I believe that the power play was like 50% for the 10 games that we played together.
Just incredible. And to think about your time with Bobby Orr, you had some time with Ray Bourque as well to be able to play with both of those defensemen. And then, obviously there was sort of a change in turnover of the roster with some younger players toward the end of your career in Boston, Barry Peterson, Rick Middleton, and Ray Bourque, to name a few. What was that transition like?
Well, I think when, in the late 70s, going into the 80s, I would come home from the rink, and my wife would say, you want to go play with the kids? And I said, no, I've been playing with them all day. Because they were, they were all kids, very talented. Ray was great to play with. He was like a sponge. I kind of mentored him for 4 years, and he was just absorbed everything. From handling the puck, looking for people, going against the flow, staying on your feet when you had to. So he was just a real sponge about the strategy of the game. And he was. We also had Brad McCrimmon, who came in with Ray and made a pretty good impression in the Boston team. Barry Peterson came in, and he and Rick Middleton clicked into an unbelievable line. And Mike Krushinski was a young guy that came in and really, made the third guy in that line. We still had the Peter McNabb and the Terry O'Reilly and Stan Jonathan or John Winsick. So they were very forceful line, and they were fun to play with.
Since we bring up the names like Orr along with yourself and Raymond Bourque, who you had a chance to play with, if you sort of take a wider view, is it pretty incredible the legacy of defensemen that the Bruins have had in franchise history?
I think I don't think there was Eddie Shore was probably the most dominant defenseman, back in the 20s and 30s, and so charismatic. But once they didn't have anybody over the years generally that was, kind of taking the puck for a whirl till Bobby showed up, and Bobby changed the theme of the game, that the defenseman could control the game, come late, and get into the rush. And Bobby and I are the same age. He's a few months older than I. He came in into the league as an 18-year-old. I came in as a 20-year-old. But it was after us, the one guy that steered the team for many years was Harry Sinden. And Harry Sinden, he played we were the one world champion. He was a defenseman, and he knew the value of having a dominant defenseman. And I think when I got traded here, Bobby was just coming back from an injury, and Harry actually had inside knowledge because he knew he coached Team Canada in '72 the Summit Series, and he knew what type of player I was, what type of player John Rattel was. He also knew what type of personalities we were. And then, I got there and Bobby went out, and we still had success. And then, that's why he went after Ray Bourque. He wanted, again, to have that dominant defenseman. And you can go, right up until, Zdeno Chara, somebody that's really going to make an impression on the blue line.
Brad, I wanted to ask you about the centennial season with the Bruins, honoring all of the eras of Bruins hockey, obviously you being a big part of that, and then selected to the all-centennial team. What did that honor mean to you?
It was an interesting thing. I was living it was in the winter, so I was in Florida, and they were having a big function, and I ended up saying, okay, I'll come up for the opening night and everything like that, but I can't stay for the dinner because I got a doctor's appointment. I got to go back to Florida. And, Charlie Jacobs called me and said, Brad, I'm not supposed to tell you, but you're on the Centennial team. Do you think you could stay over? And I said, Charlie, I think I can now. So it was quite an honor.
Brad, when you watch the Bruins or just the National Hockey League in general now, is there anybody that catches your eye that you find yourself watching?
Yeah, I think, definitely the Makar out in Colorado is a heck of a player. What I look for with most guys, if they're going to be a puck-controlling defenseman, their ability to go back against the flow with the puck. One of the things that I've always said is that when you come around that net, the first thing you see is the first thing they see. So it might not be the right play. So you got to learn to be able to go back against the flow, and you got to hold it long enough till the hole's open. So I look for those type of guys, and then I look for the guys that defensively will not necessarily block shots, but get the shots before they leave the stick. That's closing the gap, and it means that they're in control because they're not backing off waiting for something to happen. They're dictating what happens.
Well, Brad Park, we really appreciate you taking the time to join Judd and I here on the Hockey Hub podcast. Nifty, thanks for joining us. What does it mean to you to have your 2002 Paralympic sled hockey team inducted into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame?
I say it's the icing on the cake. We were inducted into the Olympic and Paralympic Hall of Fame in Colorado Springs 2 years ago, and we thought that was great. And we were saying that, wouldn't it be super if we could get into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame? Never really thinking that we would. But, after all these years, over 20 years, it was kind of a surprise that we're getting all this recognition right now. But as my assistant coach, Tommy Moulton, said, we were the spark that lit the fire for sled hockey, really, in the United States, once we won the medal, because we had heard that the program may be cut if we didn't win the medal. We heard that afterwards, not before. And since then, they've won a bronze and 4 golds in a row, and they're the winningest team in the world.
Nifty, remind us and walk us through the timeline on how this all came to be, that you became the coach of this fabled hockey team.
Well, the great thing is nobody knows this story. And we've been working for 8 years to possibly do a scripted movie. We've had several scripts, but we're about a couple days away from signing up with a company to do a documentary on it. And it's a great story, but I'll give you the short form. It happened with a phone call. A friend of mine back in 2001 called me, early 2001, Paul Edwards. He was on the U.S. disabled ski team. And unbeknownst to me, he was also a sled hockey player. But I didn't know that because I didn't know what sled hockey was. And he called me and he just said, hey, I heard that the U.S. national sled hockey team is looking for a coach because their coach quit after the World Championships last year, and they're going to be the host team in Salt Lake City in 2002 in the Paralympics. Would you be interested? And my head started spinning. I went, wow, that might be great. But then in the next breath, he says, you do know what sled hockey is, right? And I figured if I said no, he'd say, oh, never mind. So I said, yeah, I know what it is. I had never seen it. I didn't really have a clue. All I heard was Paralympics and hockey. And I thought it would be a challenge. It would be a lot of fun. So it took it to the next level. And when I talked to the manager, I told him I was interested, and he had the same questions. But then he went on to tell me that the team had never won a game. They were in Nagano. They won like an exhibition game, but not a game in the tournament. And then the World Championships, they didn't win a game. So now they were going to go into Salt Lake City and without a clue on, what would happen. And they just didn't want to embarrass themselves. And, I looked at it as a challenge, not, no dreams of gold medals were in our heads. Let's put it that way.
And reading up on it, Nifty, the only reason the team qualified was because the U.S. was the host city in 2002. Exactly. So you come in and, reading the write-up, on the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame website about you coming in and changing the style of play and the culture. Where did you begin and what did that entail?
Well, first, they didn't have a style of play. What Tommy and I noticed, my assistant coach Tom Moulton and myself noticed early on, because we started watching some tapes from Nagano and from the World Championships, and all these guys did was chase the puck around the ice like a bunch of peewees because the other team always had it. So first, and then we noticed that their defense stayed in way too long, and the other teams would get breakaway after breakaway, and they couldn't win a game. They just weren't playing right. So we decided that we needed more speed and to put some of our best players back on defense, and B, we needed a system, a simple system, because some of these guys never grew up playing hockey. They either learned it in the rehab where they went to for an accident, or they just grew up watching hockey and found it in the rehab where they might have gone for, who knows, months and months as one of the sports, because they introduced wheelchair basketball and a lot of other sports. And a bunch of them took it. One of the guys that made the team had never played hockey growing up, had been in a terrible accident, lost both legs, and 3 years later he made the national team because he was a kamikaze. It was a lot of different levels of ability, but we did have 2 world-class players. I've made maybe 3 or 4 world-class players on the team, and that way we were able to compete. But honestly, after what happened was we selected the team in August 2001. We were supposed to play in a tournament with Canada and Japan up in Montreal on September 13th, and 9/11 happened. And we, again, they shut the airspace down, never went up there. And we never played another team for 6 months before we went into Salt Lake City. So all we did was practice amongst ourselves, but it gave us, Tom and I, time to instill a system that simple enough that everybody on the team could understand and hopefully use in a game. But we didn't know until we got into Salt Lake City.
Nifty, from your playing days, as you well know, there's, and especially as the job has evolved, coaching, there is just so many layers to coaching. I'm curious what that learning curve was like for you. Really a novice coach, I'm assuming.
Oh, I was a novice.
And new to the sport, their particular sport, what that learning curve was, and then having to get to know the players, their personalities, and then to get them not only systems-wise, but to have them be the best versions of themselves so you could reach this ultimate goal.
Well, you wouldn't even believe it, Rick. I mean, I called it the bizarro world of sled hockey. I did not know the beehive I was getting into, because as soon as I was even asked to coach, there was another coach from Chicago that thought he should be king. And who's this guy? Even though he played in the NHL, bringing him in from the outside, and he caused a lot of flack and problems with the team all the way into Salt Lake City. And it's a longer story, and we don't have time here. But as it turned out, almost half of the guys that we ended up selecting, and to his own credit, he ran the Rehab Institute of Chicago, and he got these guys a lot of ice time. They took them to a lot of tournaments, and they developed their skills on the ice. But he didn't skate. He used to coach them from the bench. And almost half of the guys on the national team, we ended up picking from Chicago. And some of them, about 3 of them, were really allegiant to him. So not only did Tom and I have to teach them a system where, some of them were having a difficult time, offensive zone, neutral zone, defensive zone, where do you go on the face-off, all this stuff. We had these other guys off the ice, allegiant to him, and at one time trying to cause a mutiny to get me kicked off as coach. That's the story.
I didn't expect that layer to the story.
yeah, that's why it's going to make a great documentary.
Yeah. Well, hey, by the way, do you and Tommy have your Screen Actors Guild card? Because when the movie comes out, you're going to have to play yourselves, you know.
Well, we've been trying for 8 years to get a script written and a movie done, but we decided, because it's a lot quicker and a lot cheaper to do a documentary. And that way the story will be out there, and then hopefully people will be interested in maybe doing a movie down the road. But no, we just wanted this story to come out and be told. And it's a perfect time with the Hall of Fame coming up.
And so, Nifty, obviously, you come home with the gold, but leading up to the gold medal game and whether it's the round robin or any other game that sort of stand out to you where it was sort of like the aha moment that you might actually have something special here?
Well, yes and no. I mean, when we went into Salt Lake City, we still had a little disruption on the team, like I told you about. But once we got in, we made sure that everybody was going to play, like they said in the 1980 team, for the name on the front, not the back. And so everybody bought into USA. All the team problems were, I was told, put aside. And our first game was against Japan. Now, as we were saying, they had never won a game, so I was worried that I wasn't even concerned about Canada number 1 seed, Norway number 2 seed. I figured if we were going to get in the bronze medal game, maybe, that would be the first goal. We'd have to beat Japan, Estonia, and probably Sweden. And the first game was Japan, and it was at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you could count how many people were in the stands. So we didn't have a big cheering section for us. And the game was 0-0 going into third period. I turned to Tommy and I said, if we don't win this one, we might as well just go home. And turned out we scored 3 in the third. We won 3-0. And that gave us some confidence. We had a couple exhibition games before that, but, you can't put anything on them that we did well in. But the first game of the tournament, and they never beat Japan before. So this was a big win for us. But we're playing the next night against Canada, and it's been sold out for weeks. 6,000 people in the E-Center. We went from 60 maybe in the stands on Friday to 6,000. Biggest crowd these guys ever played in front of against the number 1 seed. So you can imagine how nervous we were. And as it turned out, we ended up spanking them 5-1. They never recovered. They didn't win another game. And Sylvester Fliss, nicknamed Sly, probably the best player, one of the world-class players, but had never really been seen at that level. He was one of the guys, I could recognize it in training camp. We put him back on defense. He wore number 4, ironically, and he scored a hat trick in the Canada game. And that was his coming out party because he ended up scoring 11 goals in 5 games with 3 hat tricks. And he ended up as the MVP of the whole tournament. But we didn't know that was going to happen. And when we beat Canada for the first time, like Brick, these tournaments. I played in 2 Canada Cup tournaments. You get some momentum. You're only playing for a week. It's not an 80-game season. You get some momentum. We started believing in ourselves for the first time. And now our next game was Norway, and we looked at each other saying, hey, if we beat Norway, we're in the gold medal game. We never dreamed we'd ever be there. It's just the way the schedule was set up. And but that Canada game was the game that for the first time in 8 months that we really believed we might be able to win something.
It's just such a phenomenal story. You win gold. I'm curious as we wind down this interview. We could talk all day, Nift. You know that.
Oh yeah.
I'm curious what your relationship is with the program today, and do you feel like you started a dynasty? They've won gold in 2010, 14, 18, 22.
I would like to say so, but they fired us. They fired us. I don't know whether they just didn't rehire us. Let's put it that way. And there was so much politics being played at that time because USA Hockey wasn't involved yet. They were helping out with the jerseys and maybe a few bucks, but they had not taken sled hockey on as a national governing body yet. They didn't do that till 2006. So for whatever reason, they didn't want us back. And that's fine. I always said you can only win the first one once. And they turned the gold into a bronze in Torino in 2006. But since then, USA Hockey took it over, I believe, right after the 2006 Paralympics, and they've won 4 golds since then. They not a lot of teams can even challenge them. Canada can, but the best player in the world, his name is Declan Farmer, and he is something else. You got to see him.
Well, 2002 started it all, Nifty, and that's why that team is going into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. Congratulations. Induction ceremony on December 4th in Pittsburgh. We really appreciate your time. We look forward to seeing you around the Garden soon.
We're joined now by former Bruins Shawn Thornton, who's currently in the front office with the Florida Panthers. And let's start off right here, Thorny. Congratulations on last year's Stanley Cup.
Thank you. Yeah, it was pretty special run the boys had. We were fortunate enough to get the rings last night. So they included the executives with the hockey ops staff and the players. So I was part of the ceremony last night. It was great. They did a beautiful job.
Well, let's go further into that. You won Stanley Cups in 2007 with the Anaheim Ducks, 2011 with the Bruins. What did you appreciate about winning it as an executive? And I understand it was different.
Yeah, it's a lot different. It's great to be along for the ride, to be in this organization for 11 years, to see the dedication and the, patience that the Vitals and Seafoods have had with this organization, and continuing to invest in it and having that investment pay off and be a part of, helping grow the fan base and selling sponsorships and ticketing and a lot of those things. It's great, but it's not the same as being the man in the arena. I have a unique perspective on that, probably, opposed to others in the organization that are on the business side, but I didn't really feel as much part of it as I did when I was a player, for sure. But again, I'm so happy for ownership and for the guys and for the coaching staff and for, all the front office to see all their hard work come to fruition.
As someone who's been on the business side here for the Panthers for a number of years and also played for the franchise, it seems like the Panthers had been building the footprint, building the fan base in South Florida. But what sort of a jolt did the process get by the franchise winning its first Stanley Cup?
Yeah, I would say was for the last 10 years, the organization has really been, building the fire. We've been growing the game at the grassroots level. We've been in the community. We've, had a presence in the last 3-4 years, being consistent winners. And then, obviously with the Stanley Cup last June, I would say we poured gasoline on the fire. It's exploded. Revenues are through the roof. Ticket sales, our attendance, we were at 18.6 last year. I think it was our average attendance was 9th in the league, and we're expected to be above that this year. And it's just been great to see that, all of it kind of came together after the last 8, 9, 10, 11 years of really building it, and having that fan base here to really embrace the team when they're winning is simply amazing. Watching, being at Game 7 and looking around, and yeah, there were some white and blue jerseys in the crowd, but it was 90% Panthers fans that showed up and shelled out for tickets for Game 7 Stanley Cup, and it was just amazing to be a part of.
Can you give us a little perspective? So when you were playing with the Panthers and you first got to the Panthers after leaving the Bruins, just how far it's come from when you first landed in Florida to where it is now?
Well, I mean, we've talked about it as an exec team as we're going through and trying to create what the vision of this franchise looks going forward. We had 5,163 people were announced attendance. My second game here, we were playing the Ottawa Senators on a Tuesday. Now it was a necessary evil. Vinny and Doug and our CEO Matt decided to rip every single comp out of the ecosystem in Florida, and just build it from the ground up. And I remember being in that game, looking around, and we had 5,100 announced, but I felt as a player, it was like wives and scouts in here, and that was about it. And then, like I just said, we just announced today we sold out of season tickets. We're on a wait list now. We're going to do close to 19,000 a game probably. We've had more sellouts than we've ever had in the history of the franchise, and again, expecting more this year. So it's really been amazing to be a part of on this side and see where we're at. And Florida's a hockey state now at the end of the day. I mean, between us and Tampa across the way, it's been pretty fun to see the sport explode in the state in the last decade.
You played with Sasha Barkov when he was first breaking into the National Hockey League. What do you love about his game and the type of captain he's become?
Yeah, I mean, he is the most unselfish individual that I've been around. You think, I'm not in there with him anymore, so his leadership style is probably completely different than, he was in his second or third year pro, and I was taking him to the Anchor Bar in Buffalo for wings because he's from the same town as too. I know they like chicken wings in Tempore. He told me last night he still didn't think they were that good, but his wings and his chicken is a lot better. But you know what? The way he plays the game, he could put up probably 100, 150 points a year if he was focused on offense, but he is so focused on doing whatever it takes to win while he's out there. He's probably the best defensive forward in the NHL, or he is the best defensive forward in the NHL. And I think the true test of players' greatness is how he makes the players around him better. And I think there's few guys in the league. He's one of them that whoever you put on his wings, they're instantly better players by playing with him.
I've talked with countless Bruins guys who had a chance to play with you on that 2011 team. And one of the things that they talk about all the time is how much that you meant to the culture as soon as you got to the Bruins and then the team winning the Stanley Cup in 2011. I guess with that in mind, when you saw Billy Zito jump on as the general manager of the team, how did he really influence the culture and what we see now from the Panthers?
Well, I mean, he's had his fingerprints all over it, right? The way he has been able to look for character individuals while balancing the analytical side of it and finding some of these guys that are, I don't want to say diamonds in the rough, but maybe reclamation projects that have come in here and score 30, 40, 50 goals. It's been truly remarkable to witness. Now, I'm completely on the business side. I have absolutely nothing to do with the hockey side, so I'm not in there on the daily and seeing how he thinks about that and builds it. I'm kind of on the outside like everyone else, just looking in. But they're champions for a reason. It looks like the culture in that room, being around the guys a little bit that I am, they genuinely look like and seem like they want to play for each other and are just good character individuals that can play the game.
Well, I recognize you're on the business side and you're not a part of hockey ops. How important was it to get Sam Reinhart back in the fold and re-signed?
It seemed pretty important from the outside looking in. Yeah, like honestly, I didn't have. I'm completely genuine when I say I'm not on any of those conversations. But obviously, he was one of the top goal scorers in the league last year. He's a key cog for this machine that they have, and they've done a really good job, in my opinion, of wrapping up core guys for the prime. Looks like the prime of their career, and having this core together for the foreseeable future that bodes well for the organization as a whole.
You went through it the season after with the Bruins. What's the challenge of trying to repeat?
For me, the season after was we've been to the finals 2 years in a row here, right? So it was the physical test of keeping your body ready to go night in and night out. And mentally, we think I thought I was invincible as a hockey player, and you just show up and keep going. But that grind wears on you, and really taking the precautions to make sure you get the amount of rest you need to, condition yourself in the off season. What it looks like, the guys are in phenomenal shape. So I think just the wear and tear on your body and being able to maintain optimal conditioning and avoid injuries throughout the year were key for us. And then the mental side of it too, just making sure you're fresh mentally every single day and there's no lulls, especially as you're going into a long grind.
Bigger challenge mentally or physically?
I actually go back and forth in my head on that all the time. I don't know. I don't know. It's both.
I have to ask you a couple of questions about the Bruins before we spring you. If I had
No
told
worries.
you and Gregory Campbell, who's in the Panthers organization in 2010, that Brad Marchand was going to be the captain of the team, how would you have responded?
I would have said he has some growing up to do, but his competitiveness could get him there. And he has grown up a lot. He'll admit it. And I'm extremely happy for him. I was fortunate enough to come back for his 1,000th game last year. His wife invited me, and it's so great to see where he has ended up. And I got nothing but the kindest words to say for Marshy. He's been an ultimate professional. Even some of the antics. I think the antics used to take away from how great of a hockey player he was when he was younger. But I mean, he was a difference maker from his first year on the ice. I mean, there's no secret that he only played 14 games with me and Soupy for a reason. He was better than us and deserved to go up and play with Bergie.
So the other thing that, in talking to some of your teammates about Gregory Campbell and his relationship with Marshy, he said, I think the quote that I got from one player was, Soupy is relentless. He constantly gives it to Marshy, still gives it to him. What's he giving it to Marshy about?
I don't know, actually. I haven't been around that part of it. Again, Soupy's on the hockey side. I saw him last night. It's probably the first time I've seen him in months. I think those two constantly banter, though. They always did. They sat beside each other in the locker room. They're pretty close. So I'm sure it's a back and forth, not just Soupy giving it to him. I'm sure Marshy's giving it back just as hard.
So I know you tell stories in the past about your Stanley Cups and some of the bouts you had. You were one of the best technical fighters of all time in the National Hockey League. But I want you to walk us through your penalty shot goal in 2012.
Yeah, amazing. I never got a shootout opportunity after that from any coach. Walking through it, I mean, I pulled it off in practice a bunch of times. I could also go back to the forehand on that move if I wanted to. And I asked Timmy Thomas and I asked Tuukka, I'm like, should I try it? And they were like, yeah, you have to. And listen, I don't think anyone was expecting it. If I didn't pull it off, I didn't disappoint anybody. Nobody was expecting it anyways. And if I do pull it off, I mean, maybe we'll be talking about it 11 years later. So, a bit of luck there too, but I knew I could pull the move off. I just didn't know if it would go in.
Did you needle Claude at all? Like, hey, how about the power play? Let's go.
Not the power play, but when we got to shootouts, I'm like, you've seen it in practice. You've seen it in a penalty shot. Like, really, you're getting the sixth defenseman to go before me? I'm not that bad. I just proved it. But anyways, I get to retire 1 for 1, so I'll take the win.
So the other thing I need to ask you about, Big Papi, David Ortiz, was telling a story to Nikita Zadorov when those two had a chance to meet for the first time this summer at Fenway Park. And Papi tells a story, and I think you're giggling because you know where I'm going. He said that you left him tickets to a game, and you told him that the minute he walks in, I'm dropping the gloves with someone. Break down the story.
I love it. I go to his event every year his golf event every year down here in Florida, and the story changes a little bit every time he tells it, but the premise of it is right. I did leave him tickets. He came to a game. I think we had dinner like a week before too. And anyways, he was in our locker room right before the game to say hello, or in the training room, and we hugged it out. And he's like, "You gonna fight for me tonight, big boy?" or something along those lines. I don't remember it. And I was like, "I don't know. We'll see." And it just worked out. The timing that. We were down 2-0, I think. He just got to his seats, and I squared off with kid Tim Jackman right in front of him, like the minute he sat down. So he's convinced. I've told him it's not wasn't orchestrated, but he's convinced I did this for him. He's the best. The next day, he sent a bat to my house that said, like, "You are a bad man," or something like that, and he signed it. He's been a friend for a long time, and I love that he still remembers it and still tells the story. He's such a good dude.
Well, I'm glad that you clarified it, because in my head, the way he told it, I'm envisioning that he sits down and then all of a sudden you jump onto the ice. And I was going to ask, like, who was the unsuspecting character who had to face you for that?
No, we had fought before, and in this instance, he didn't really have a choice. But yeah, it was a little coincidental. But Poppy still doesn't believe me. He's like, "No, you did it. You did it for me. You did it for me." So I love that guy.
See, it doesn't, you can't let truth get in the way of a good story.
Right.
Thorny, thanks for taking the time and being so generous with your time here today. Good luck this season, and we look forward to seeing you here down the road.
Thank you. Good talking to you.
I think it's just to be a part of it is something that I think means a lot to me. And you think about all the history that this franchise has had, and the legends have been through these doors is very meaningful for me to be a part of this celebration, and especially against Montreal and their history as well.
Patrice, if you can remember when you first got here, what you knew of the history of the team, and then when you started to realize the meaning of being a Bruin.
Yeah, I think right away when I came in, to be honest, I didn't know that much about the history and everything else, but as soon as you walk into the doors and you see the legends, walking in at any given time, from John Busick to Wayne Cashman, that was an assistant coach back then, to Ray and all the the amazing players in Cam. So very special. I think you understand it very quickly, and these guys always been available to answer any questions, and it kind of makes you understand what it really means to wear that jersey and the pride that you have to wear with.
I noticed the inside of your jacket. Was that special?
Yeah, special made. Yeah, from the team. So a little gift from everyone. I think very thoughtful and pretty special little piece of a little surprise, I guess, and that I can cherish and keep at home.
How much do you embrace now being part of that group that can be a resource for today's players and future players?
Yeah, I think it's definitely fun to try to be around and try to help out as much as you can. I think it's there's a lot of guys in that locker room that I'm good friends with, and I have a lot of respect for. So always available if they need me in any capacity. To be honest with you, to answer any questions and whatnot. I know they they have it handled, and they have a lot of leadership already in that locker room. But just just like I did, I guess in my days, it's just more being there for them and to support, but also being a fan and showing, I guess, support and showing that you're pulling for them.
Patrice, did this year create some connections with some of the former players that maybe you hadn't met before that kind of united the alumni as a group?
I can't say particularly that I've had to be honest, it's over the years. I think I've done that. Being able to get to know some of the guys, whether it's at the golf tournament, or during the year, guys coming in. As I said before, the guys are welcome in the locker room. They always, the alumni always usually come in and say hi and shake hands. So over the years, I've gotten to know a lot of those guys, and it's obviously always special and meaningful to have those conversations. I have a lot of respect for all of them, and I think you just carry on that tradition, and it's always a lot of fun to be able to do that.
Patrice, players tend to live in the present, and they say, when I retire, I'll stop and reflect
Yeah.
and start to look back on my career. Have you had a chance to do that? Put it in perspective?
It's a good question, and you're so right that that's what I used to say. When I'm done, I'll be able to look back. I don't know if I really have done that, to be quite honest. It's at times I've done it, but it seems like life comes at you so fast that you don't really always take the time to reflect and look back. But the one thing that I'll say is I'm really thankful to have been able to play for so long and for an original six franchise, a franchise that has a lot of history and to be in the city like Boston. So I feel very blessed, and the people I've been able to meet over the years, the friendships that I've had, that I still have, is pretty special.
Joined by two of the greats, two guys whose numbers are hanging in those rafters. Rick Middleton and Terry O'Reilly are with us. I was trying to do the math and I can't do it. How many goals do you think in the history of this team you both figured in on the same goal?
Well, I'm not sure, but
I did math once about the number of points, not just goals, but points. And we had something like 610 points in 3 years together.
Wow!
And to put that into perspective, Gretzky only has 618.
Yeah.
Hey, but hold it. Be careful. That's Nifty's math. Okay. When you look it up, it may be a little different.
It might not be exact.
So we had...
He had 550. I had 75.
Oh, no, you had 550 PMs.
Yeah.
You had the penalty minutes.
We had 2,000 minutes together.
Yeah. You remember when you were in Philly in those days, and we'd go in for our exhibition games that would be about 6 hours long, right? And they dropped the puck, and Peter McNabb and I always joked about this. And if you were on the ice, you'd feel the same way. They dropped the puck, and all of a sudden, everybody would drop their gloves. All 5 guys would grab me, or they would grab him, and he'd be skating around looking for somebody, and I'm going, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
Terry, we showed the footage earlier of the night at Madison Square Garden. And, I could sort of see Terry O'Reilly going over the boards and getting involved. I couldn't picture Peter McNabb doing that.
Well, he was my buddy and my teammate. He was coming up to look after me. Actually, all of you guys.
Well, the guy that came down the steps was the guy's brother that Terry grabbed. Yeah. So when he came down and jumped on Terry, Peter was the next guy over. Yeah. He saw Peter coming. He ran back up the steps. And then enter Mike Milbury, who was in the hall with me. He had no idea what happened.
And he
got
chased
quickly.
He chased the guy up to the top.
Yeah, took his shoe off.
Yeah, beat him with his own shoe.
When you guys think Montreal Canadiens, what comes to mind for each of you?
They ain't what they used to be.
No, I always said that you always had to be at the top of your game. I mean, you knew they were going to force you to not make mistakes and play as good as you could, and you might have a chance to beat them, especially in 77, 78 when they had such a great team. But we knew we could beat them in 79, and we came within that close to do it.
Yeah.
I said earlier tonight there are 12 retired numbers in those rafters. You guys have 2 of the 12. Taz, what did it mean to you when they put your number up there?
Greatest honor to a hockey player, to a Boston Bruin, to finalize and summarize your career. It was my home. Came down here when I was 19 years old, never left. So.
And in your case, Nift,
well, after 30 years, I said, I can die a happy man now. At the age of 65.
How about this entire year? This is kind of the cap, the ending of it, the cream on the crop a little bit here.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a great year, a great ceremony. We used to, in the old days, always look at Montreal and say, look how they do their performance. It was the top, the Bruins, right up there now. This is so much fun.
Yeah. And I'd just like to say, being up there with Nifty and Ray Bork, 2 of my former teammates and my co-captains when I was coaching. I called them both in and asked them to be co-captains, and
which was another great honor
to be up there beside each other. It's great. I look up there and my heart warms. So.
What was it like standing in the hallway and the players coming in between you and bumping fists on their way out?
I thought it was great. I mean, and they really appreciated it too, because they know the history. If they've been watching it at all over the years, seeing the tapes, and they really got pumped. Look at the score today.
Yeah.
Oh, you're taking credit for that now?
Absolutely.
Come on.
Absolutely.
All I could think of was how young they look. Did I look that young?
2 of the great players in the history of this team. 2 of the great nicknames too. Nifty and Taz. It's great to visit with you guys. Thanks very much.